Hello everyone. This is a portrait of my grandfather. His name is Dr. Shay, and he was one of the most famous gastroenterologists in all of Philadelphia during his lifetime. He published over 300 scientific articles in the field of cancer, physiology, nutrition, and gastroenterology. He was also the founding director of the Fell's Cancer Research Center at Temple University in 1937. I would love to be able to stand here and tell you that my interest in health and science began on my grandfather's knee, and I'm sharing wisdom and inspiration. I would really love to tell you that's how it happened, but it wasn't, because my grandfather died 17 years before I was born. Now, I had known that, but what I didn't know until May of last year, nearly 50 years after his death, was how he died. My grandfather, one of the most respected medical doctors in the city of Philadelphia, died on the operating table from malpractice, misdiagnosis, medical misadventure. My grandfather was convinced by a colleague of his that my grandfather's chronic debilitating angina, chest pain, was caused by a new medical theory called a reflex arc between an inflamed gallbladder and his heart. Desperate to get his angina under control, my grandfather went under the knife and never woke up. The coroner told my father, who was going through medical school of his own, that one of the coronary arteries of my grandfather's heart was so blocked you couldn't fit a pin through it. So I'm coming here to talk to you about wellness, not as some happy, hippie, kumbaya, hold hands romp into bliss. Okay, I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about my grandfather's life. So I really hope you take this information seriously, because I take it seriously, because I don't have a grandfather right now. Never did. That I met. Because I know that if he had gotten the information early enough that I have today, he would have been alive, and I would have been able to meet him. So the foundations of wellness in the Western world began in my book in 1895 with the founder of chiropractic, D.D. Palmer. Now, he cognized the triangle of health: physical, chemical, mental, or the reverse triangle: trauma, toxins, and stressful thoughts. And this model in 1895 was very good, because life in 1895 was a lot simpler. Food was organic by default. Most people were farmers. They were outside in the sunshine. Their families lived around them, near them. They exercised all day. They slept because Edison had not popularized the light bulb for too long, so people went to bed when the sun went down and got up when the sun went up. The world today, however, is infinitely more complex, so this model is now simplistic. Now, 110 plus years later, I, in false modesty, upgraded the triangle when I was in chiropractic school to 3 intersecting circles, which much more accurately represents the complex interweaving of the 3 major categories of human health instead of 3 rigid bars. Then I continued my studies into neurology and put the brain as the centerpiece, because all facets of health and wellness are routed through, directly or indirectly, modulated or controlled by the brain. Even then, this model is still too simplistic, because life is too complex. There's so many things that are going wrong that you can't just say, I'm going to help your physical body, your chemical body, and your mental, emotional body, and your brain. And they're like, okay, now what? It's too vague. So what I did is I spliced the 3 external spheres, physical, biochemical, mental, emotional, into 3 major subcomponents. Brain is number 1, remains in the center. Physical is spliced into 3 parts: bowel, or any other form of excretionary pathway, meaning urination, defecation, sweating, exhalation, even your hair and nails are a form of excretia. Body is the physical structure. This is if dealing with old injuries, misaligned joints, muscle problems, posture. This encompasses all the fields of the physical body, from chiropractic to massage to orthopedic surgery. Burst is referring to speed training or exercise, high-intensity interval training. Now, this form of exercise is thankfully coming back into fashion, but not so much with people over the age of 50. Exercise is now an issue because people have the luxury of living a completely sedentary lifestyle for basically their whole life. Whereas exercise was not even done for exercise, it was just done as you had to forage and go sprint after things or get away from things. Biochemical sphere was split into biotoxins, which is everything that's bad for you, and bionutrients, which is nutrition and everything that you need. Bionutrients is one of the most controversial topics in all of health and wellness. In fact, on my upcoming website, which should have been launched yesterday, but we've had technical delays and it's going to be launched in the next week or so, I have an article called Playing with Fire: Why Nutrition is the Most Volatile Subject in All of Health. And it does not give any specific recommendations on what you should or shouldn't eat, but takes into account the 11 major narratives: religious narratives, personal narratives, time narratives, financial, family, culture, occupation, etc. I don't think occupation's in there. Cultural, society, health, etc. that intersect all on food and why it's so volatile. So if you understand all the 11 narratives and you see where you fit, then it diffuses the discourse. So it's not so volatile. Does that make sense? All right. Then we have breakfast. This is really interesting. My first practice was in the Bay of Plenty for 3 years. And a huge part of my practice was dealing with chronically ill females. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, insomnia, depression, anxiety, autoimmune diseases, digestive disorders, all at the same time. And I found through detailed analysis, every single one, 100% of all my chronically ill patients, except for 3, had a terrible breakfast. No breakfast, coffee breakfast, sugar breakfast, glorified sugar breakfast. So I spliced it out as a completely separate category because the pattern was so glaring. Mental emotional, I spliced into 3. Bothers, which is another word for stress. Now this is all things stressful: financial stress, spiritual stress, emotional stress, relationship stress, family stress, cultural stress, you name it. Obviously a very big bucket. You had to put them all there. Bugs is another word for symbiosis, which is your relationship between microscopic bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, the rest of the world, both externally, like molds in your house from leaky house syndrome here in New Zealand, to your internal gut bacteria and the balance or imbalance therein. Last is bedtime, another word for sleep. And this is everything having to do with sleep. Now, you'll notice that all of these parts share and intersect with each other. If you ignore any one of them, the health will collapse at some point, or at least will not be optimal. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, if you're also, notice that all of them begin with B. Brain, bowel, body, burst, biotoxins, bionutrients, breakfast, bothers, bugs, and bedtime. I tried with S. Bedtime was sleep, bugs was symbiosis, bothers was stress, breakfast was starting meal, bionutrients was sustenance, biotoxins was synthetics, burst was speed training, body was structure, bowel, there's a great 4-letter word that begins with S. So I opted for either using that, stool, or sticking with the B's, and I opted with B's. So in the time that I have, I do not have the luxury of going into each point in depth. Each of these points by themselves have several, devote several PhDs to if you really wanted to. So what I can do in the short time is go over all of them to give you an overview and go in depth into one, and then share with you how you can get more information on each of them. And if you need personal coaching and attention to deal with your own 10 points of wellness, how to do that. So the first one is the brain. Now, the joke is men die from quick, violent deaths. Now this is kind of a very interesting intro. Why did you open with that, Dr. Shay? Well, have you noticed that men and women usually die from different things? Have you noticed that? So one reason is that men typically have a stronger left brain than women, and women have a typically stronger right brain than men. So what is left brain activity? It is action, not thinking. It is doing, not contemplating. Action, not emotion. So hyper left brain activity leads to things like violence, which is action without thinking. It leads to stupidity. How many women are on the show Jackass? Not many. In fact, I think there was one guest. I think it was Britney Spears. So men die from stupidity. They die from violence. They also die from accidents. Who gets ADD, boys or girls?
Boys.
Boys, mostly. Okay. And also fatal arrhythmias, because the left side of the brain controls the rhythm of the heart through the atrioventricular node. Hyper left brain, arrhythmia, you can die. Make sense? Now, to lighten it up a little bit, I wrote a 4,000 plus word article called Blokeitis. It's a satirical yet scientific piece I wrote, which is going to go on the website. And it's a new disease I've discovered, also called alpha-menitis, Jock's disease, Jockitis, domineering manitis. And it's a collection of behaviors and mental patterns of teenage to middle-aged males which leave them vulnerable to injury, disease, and early death based around their hyperactive left brain activity with particular fixation on physical prowess despite injury, pain, or dysfunction. Symptoms: excessive interest in sports, sports paraphernalia, sports TV shows, and sports events. Obsession with fishing is a normal sequela of Blokeitis, particularly between sports seasons. Usually linked with low-grade alcoholism, especially during sporting events. Binge drinking on weekends is typical, worse in social groups of other Blokeites. Blokeitis is contagious, particularly in pubs on weekends when rugby is on. So I wrote this piece because it was Brain Injury Awareness Week, this past week, or something of that nature. Post-concussive syndrome is a huge issue and becoming more so. You've seen, hopefully, the articles in the States of the gridiron issues. You know, even, it wasn't Joe Montana, it was one of the most famous quarterbacks in history, so famous I forget his name. I'm sorry, who? Yeah, or somebody, I can't remember. But anyway, one of the major quarterbacks is now suing the NFL for brain injury, post-concussive syndrome. This is going to become more and more of an issue because you can't hide post-concussive syndrome as these teenage 20-year-old athletes get older and older and exhibit more signs of aggression, depression, and dangerous behavior. So the piece is designed to be humorous but enlightening. And there's a huge section of all the scientific jargon written for clinicians. And don't worry, if you're not a clinician, there's a hyperlink above it. If you'd like to skip the scientific clinician version, click here and you'll go right down. You get the quick summary of what to look for. And you can go right down to the bottom and skip that. Now, the converse is that from men dying quick, violent deaths is women die from slow, painful deaths. Who gets the majority of the chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, blood sugar issues, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, autoimmune issues? Is it men or women? It's women.
Is it true that you have to be an elderly woman to get Crohn's disease?
No, you don't. Okay. Not everything written here is absolute. Okay? It's about 80-20. It's about an 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule. 90%, 80%. This is not absolute. And the reason why there are differences in brain activity within male and females is because there are more estrogen receptors on the right brain and more testosterone receptors on the left brain. So if you are a human being with a higher influx of testosterone in your system, your left brain will be activated more, and the converse is true for estrogen in the right brain. Does that make sense? So the 10 points of wellness was developed in my practice in the Bay of Plenty because I had to figure out what was going on with these chronically ill patients that were not getting better after having seen on average 10 to 15 other clinicians before they came to my door, and how to get them better in an economically depressed Bay of Plenty. Why? Because you had the global economic crisis, The Rena disaster killed the tourism in Bay of Plenty. You had PSA destroying the kiwi food industry. And, interestingly enough, you had the Rugby World Cup hurt the economy in Taronga because all the money went to Hamilton, Wellington, Auckland, and other places where the Rugby Cup was actually happening, and the Olympics in Britain. Because if people who vacation in Britain also vacation in New Zealand, and if you had a choice between vacationing in New Zealand anytime or vacationing in London when the Olympics were on, where would you go? New Zealand, funny, nice, okay. Very good. So what to do is, you have to balance the brain, okay? We don't have time to go into major strategies, except if you want to go into the blochitis article, there's a lot of strategies there for men. I'll be writing and putting articles up on the website about what to do with, for right brain. So wellness point number 2 is bowel. You have to prioritize your poop. Now, this may be kind of a chuckle subject for people, maybe a bit uncomfortable. But if you lived in a house where you couldn't flush, how long would you stay in that house? Until it became a fetid, putrid, disease-ridden mess. We understand this with modern plumbing and housing, but when it comes to our own bodies, we think we can just kind of hold it in and everything's okay. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. And if you want a quick, there's multiple things you can do to help this category, but again, due to time constraints, I'm giving you one. Number one thing you can do is honor your urge. Look at a dog. Does a dog sit there in the meeting quietly waiting till it's appropriate, or do they run to the door scratching and pawing and whining till they have to go? All right? Now, if you're stuck in a meeting and you have the urge to go and you're looking for an excuse to get up and leave, you can say, excuse me, I have to go, I'll be right back, I have to go to the men's room. And then someone snarks at you and says, what's the matter, can't you hold it in for the meeting? And your response is, well, I don't want to be ever accused in this meeting of being full of it, so I want to prove you wrong, so I'm just going to go and come right back. Okay? So honor your urge, very, very important. Because your body is trying to get rid of toxins. Why are you stopping it? Point of wellness number 3, the body. Fix your physical. This is a bust of Hippocrates. He is very important in Western medicine. In Western medicine, I'm including all of Western, whether it's naturopathy, chiropractic, allopathic medicine. Allopathic medicine has kind of claimed him for some bizarre reason because Hippocrates was actually a naturopath cum chiropractor, not a medical doctor. Okay? So he says, get knowledge of the spine, for this is the requisite of many diseases. Why? It's because the spine is the conduit between the brain and the body. All the organs, muscles, glands, skin, tissues are the conduit. The spine is the conduit in the body. So if your spine is misaligned, inflamed, or damaged, your organs, along with your muscles, joints, skins, glands, and tissue, will not function at 100%. So the simple strategy is to get under care of somebody who is skilled with the spine. And I don't care if it's a chiropractor, an osteopath, a physio, and even some trained acupuncturist in Toina. Now, if I was in a chiropractic convention, I'd be dragged out immediately. And here's why I don't care who you see as long as you see somebody. Because the profession, it's not about the profession. It's never about the profession. It's about the professional through their lens of their profession. Do they have the skill sets to help you with what you need? And you trust them with their techniques and personality. Because if someone can be the best clinician on the planet, if you don't trust them, you won't let anything happen. You'll guard, you'll undo it, whatever. So it's not about the profession. It's about rapport, plus they have the skills to help you with what you need. Okay, so the message here is to get under care. By who, I don't care, they just have to match. Do you understand? 4. Burst exercise. Now, this is the one I can go into more in depth, and I chose this one because this is one of the most neglected and most misunderstood portion of wellness. Now, who looks healthier? There's no way to kill these lights, is there, up on the front, or no?
We can kill all the lights, but then we won't be able to see them.
Okay, all right. So, on the left, if you can make it out, is a picture of a sprinter, and on the right, there's a picture of a marathoner. Okay, how many of you watched the Jamaican sprinters during the Olympics? Okay, so sprinters have an amazing physical body, right? Marathoners look like cancer patients, right? They look like cancer patients, okay? And that's actually quite a serious comment. Now, I grew up with a Boston Marathon right up my street. Commonwealth Avenue, Heartbreak Hill. Okay, so every year you'd have these joggers come by, and I would turn to my mother, a medical doctor, and say, "Mom, these people look sick." And she said, "No, they're jogging, they're healthy." It's like, "Mommy, they look sick." It's like, "No, it's good for their cardiovascular." So I was very puzzled, very, very, very puzzled as to why joggers were supposed to be healthy when they look like they're about to die. All right, and part of me wants to joke about it, part of me doesn't, because we've lost family friends over this. We've had friends who've died from heart attacks. Very prominent member of our community, for example, back home. So I didn't have the science to back up what I was seeing until I met Dr. Jay Smith. Now, Dr. Smith has some very long, nice credentials and experience and accolades, and he's very, very, very good with this whole subject. And there's only two things I want to point out. Number one, his PhD was in physiology with an emphasis on cardiovascular disease. Number two, his personal advisor at Colorado State University was Lauren Cordain. The person arguably is the top expert in all things Paleolithic, lifestyle, science, application, you name it. So he wrote this summary, Sprint Interval Training, it's a HIIT, H-I-I-T, High Intensity Interval Training. I'm making this available on my website with his permission. He's given it to me. It is roughly a 50-page synopsis with over 100 references over the entire history of cardiovascular jogging research and why it is so insanely, ridiculously, laughably flawed. Okay? Just like most psychology research is. And here's why. Here's why. Here's the analogy. Psychology research is mostly done on college campuses where you have a captive audience of 18 to 22-year-olds who have to participate in the experiments or they can't graduate with their psych degrees. I know because I was one of them. Why would you ever, ever, ever base the integrity and potential of the human psychology, the human mind, on a bunch of university-age students whose frontal lobes aren't even fully developed yet, and half of them are binging on beer, alcohol, and sleep deprivation, and other illicit drugs and experimental behavior? Makes no sense, right? As such, Dr. Smith participated in the equivalent of psychology, except it was in physiology when he was getting his PhD. So in the 70s, you should know about the history of exercise research. Before the 70s, I should say, the only way to research exercise really was with a stopwatch and a ruler. Then came VO2 max. You can measure oxygen consumption. And suddenly, everyone jumped on VO2 max in terms of research. All right? So they started doing all of this aerobic exercise. Aerobic means oxygen consuming, as opposed to anaerobic, which means not oxygen consuming. So suddenly they had a variable to measure. So all the rage is on aerobic exercise. Why? Because you could measure it. Okay, the question was not what is the optimal exercise for human health and optimal function. It was on what exercise is the best consumption for oxygen. You see how they're different questions? So why was it all the cardiovascular protocols came out to be 2 to 5 times a week for 20 to 60 minutes? You've heard that before. You need to jog 20 to 60 minutes, 2 to 5 times a week. You heard that? Some variation of that? Why is that? Where did that come from? Here's where it came from. That was the amount of time the physiology students had in order to jump in between classes or in their labs, to jump on the treadmill, have a tube stuck in their mouth to collect some data. So they had their labs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. This is where you get your 2 to 5 times a week for 20 to 60 minutes. Had nothing, zero, to do with health. It had everything to do with the convenience of data collection. Do you understand? Okay. Now, that still does not answer the question of why do they look like cancer patients. Okay? Now, by the way, the other reason why the VO2 max thing kept going and going is because in order to justify your existence as a professor who does research at a university, you have to make your research seem relevant. So then they made the dubious leap of logic that somehow better VO2 max means you were healthier. Now, you can get much better VO2 max with high-intensity interval training than you can with cardio, and I can prove it to you. I have the research article on it. So they just kept perpetuating this in order to get more funding and continue it on. This is why cardio has just gone on and on and on and on. Now, why do marathoners look like cancer patients? Just pay attention to the middle three hormones: cortisol, human growth hormone, and insulin. And you will notice the arrows are completely opposite when you compare jogger versus sprinter. Completely 100% diametrically opposed. So if you sprint, you have low cortisol, high human growth hormone, and low insulin. This is good. Now, if you sprint, wouldn't it make sense, if you understand anthropology, that you would want your body to build up stronger, leaner, faster, quicker? Why? Because usually, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you are trying to get away from something with sharp, pointy teeth and claws. Now, if that tiger chased you down on Tuesday, wouldn't it make sense that you had a mechanism built into your body to make you stronger, leaner, faster, quicker? Because that tiger's probably still there on Wednesday, right? Hunter-gatherers did not jog. They walked and they sprinted. They're walking around to forage, average 10, 15 kilometers a day, according to Cordain's research. And they sprinted away from something or after something 2 to 4 times a week. Not jogging. Have I made the point? Now, you do get some cortisol released when you sprint, but you have a huge amount of growth hormone which completely undoes any deleterious effects of cortisol, and in fact rebuilds your adrenals and reduces inflammation. So sprint training is actually a way to reduce inflammation and reduce the stress hormones and heal the adrenals. Jogging does the reverse. When you jog, you have pitifully low human growth hormone, if anything, really high insulin and really high cortisol. Now here's why they look like cancer patients. Cortisol is your stress response hormone in order to scavenge the body for any tissue and convert it into jet fuel so you can run or fight for your life. That's what it does. A cortisone injection you can give, usually you can't give it in the same spot because that spot you gave it in the last time is now dead. Right? So, what happens if you day after day, month after month, year after year, jog and constantly have a high drip of cortisol in your blood consistently? It will erode all your muscle tissues over time, and you will look gaunt like a cancer patient. Make sense? That is why. Now, where does walking fit? Walking is not jogging, walking is not sprinting. So, you get the best of both worlds if you sprint and walk. Walking, you have low cortisol, low growth hormone, but you get high brain stimulation because of the high cross-crawl movement of walking. Activate your spine, activates your brain, moves your lymph, circulation, all these wonderful things. Jogging is high cortisol, low growth hormone, but it also has high brain stimulation because you're doing cross-crawl activity. With high-intensity interval training, you have low cortisol, high growth hormone, and moderate brain stimulation because you're doing it for a short amount of time. So the best thing, combined walking and sprinting. Make sense? Now, how do you do sprint activity? And then more importantly, how do you do it safely? Especially given your level of age, condition, or injury. Does that make sense? So, how do you define sprint training? Here's the one-sentence takeaway. A level of intensity that gets you a deep muscle burn within a minute or less, followed by complete recovery. So it's intensity to a deep muscle burn in a minute or less, followed by full recovery. What is full recovery? Your beat rate of your heart is normal, your breath rate of your lungs is normal, and the burn rate of your muscles has returned to normal. Beat, breath, burn, all back to normal. That is recovery. So when you first start out, you may have to take an hour, 40 minutes, 30 minutes to recover. No shame in that. That's what happened to me. I did burst training on a special stepper. It took me 30 to 40 minutes to recover. Very embarrassed on my end. But you know what? I said to myself, I'm in it for the long haul, not the short haul. No one's giving me any medals. I'm just going to do it according to what I learned from Dr. Smith. So how do you measure progress then? You measure progress by not how much longer you do it. Why is it a minute or less? Because if you go for more than a minute, you go into jogging physiology. You go into aerobic stuff. You don't want that. Most people think progress means I can do this activity longer. No, that is not progress. That's going into aerobic. How do you measure progress? You need more intensity in the same minute, and your recovery time shortens. Example, I do the same stepper machine now, and I require 10 to 14 kgs in each arm doing flies as I'm on the stepper machine, and my recovery ranges between 5 and 10 minutes. So 14 kgs, 5 minutes were my measures of progress. Do you understand? Same minute. Okay? That's how you measure progress. That, and you can also measure how much more muscle you've got, the changes on your waistline, and these other things as well. You want the burn. Why do you want the burn? Is what you want. Some people, they just do it till they're puffed. That's not what you want. You want the burn. Because the burn means you have lactic acid. Lactic acid at that point is a hormone. Lactic acid is a hormone. Most people don't know that. Lactic acid will trigger the primary and secondary release of growth hormone, testosterone, and this other hormone soup in your body. You need the burn. That's what's going to do it. How do you do it? Complex compound movements. None of this single arm bicep nonsense, unless it's under very specific circumstances. So for example, I treated patients in the Bay of Plenty, high geriatric population, right? If you got an osteoporotic 79-year-old grandmother, you tell her to do a wind sprint, she's going to snap in half. Okay? Not good. So how do you do it? Okay? You can do it through wall push-ups. Okay? You're standing, we'll pretend there's a wall here, and I am doing push-ups against the wall. Now, I'm only really activating my arm muscles and maybe some of my back, but you know what? For a 79-year-old osteoporotic grandmother, that's the best bout of burst exercise she's had in a while. That burn in her bicep and triceps will create a small but systemic effect to start building growth hormone back into her body. Does that make sense?
Can you take on the lymphocyzers?
The question was, can you do it on the lymphocyzer? I'm teaching you the principles so you can apply it to any exercise you do. And that's my goal. So, great question. So, how do you apply this safely? If you know the principle, intensity to a deep muscle burn in a minute or less, followed by full recovery, you can apply it to anything. If you jog, and you want to continue jogging, why, I don't know, but if you have a midlife crisis you're really excited about, and you want to go run a marathon, it's either that or buying a midlife Chrysler, so take your pick. If you're going to jog, instead of jogging, walk, sprint, don't jog. Vary it. So you sprint, then you walk the rest of the way till you're fully recovered. Jog, this means sprint for the next minute, walk till you recover, and just repeat. That is the safe way to do a marathon. Make sense? If you're on a bicycle, you can cycle at a walking pace. You can then go up a hill and crank up the resistance and do that minute until you're burning. If you're in a swimming pool, you can jump in the pool, go as hard as you can for a lap, and then climb out and recover, jump back in, do a different stroke, go in, come back, climb out, recover, and repeat. Very, very easy, very safe to do because you're self-regulating. You are self-regulating. You know what your lactic acid burn is, you know what your recovery is, and you only pick an exercise that you're comfortable doing. This is very, very safe to do. So I'll give you an example about safety if you're concerned about age. Look at this study by Wisloff et al. 27 patients with stable post-infarction heart failure. Obviously, you don't do this with unstable heart issues. Post-infarction means what? These people all had a heart attack recently. So if you're concerned about your heart, pay attention, because this is about people who just had a heart attack. Average age was 75.5 plus or minus 11 years. 3 times per week for 12 weeks, or to a control group. VO2 max increased more with the high-intensity group, 46% versus 14%. And for those of you that understand statistics, that is the most impressive p-value you have ever seen in your life. The lower the p-value, the more statistically significant it is. I've never seen one to the 1,000th decimal point, ever. Also had reverse left ventricular remodeling, which is a doctor's speak for their heart was repairing. Also improved aerobic capacity, even though they didn't do aerobics, they did burst training. Endothelial function, which is doctor's speak for blood vessels integrity, and quality of life in patients. Okay? So if you do this safely and correctly, is all benefits, no matter what your age.
Does anybody run a marathon using this method?
Yes. Here's the thing, is that people who have, with which method? Are you talking?
The walk and then sprint.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood your question. Here's what I thought his question was. His question says, has anyone used this method before? I don't think anyone's won a marathon. There's a difference between training for health and training for your sport. Okay? You can train for your sport, which is really unhealthy for your health, like marathoning. You can train for rugby, which is for your sport. Is it for your health? Hell no. Okay? Voluntarily going through repetitive concussions is not what I deem healthy. Okay? So, here's the thing. High-intensity interval trainers, people who train that way, can go and jump in and, with a little bit of difficulty, can go do a marathon. Marathoners cannot go and jump in and do high-intensity interval training like okay? They can't do that. In fact, the dear family friend who died, who was a marathoner, he didn't die doing a marathon. He died doing a hike up a hill with his son. What is a hike up a hill? That's high-intensity interval on varied terrain. Died in his son's arms. Okay? Yes, question? Okay, so the question is how do you, what about warming up? So as a dancer, you have to be warmed up, otherwise you get injured. I know I had a dance studio next to my clinic in the Bay of Plenty, so I treated some dancers there. So warming up, there's 2 schools of thought. Number 1, there's the Paleolithic, this one school of thought which says you don't need to warm up to sprint away from something. Look at deer, look at any prey. They don't sit there and, when they see the wolves, they put on their sweats and their bandanas and everything and put on Jane Fonda. No, they're going from cold to sprint. All right? So if you're sprinting away I'm talking about sprinting. I do not think you really need to warm up because that is hardwired into your whole system. Okay? Now, for your sport, yes, I would agree warming up. But what you're not doing is jogging. As a dancer, you're doing varied motions at a medium pace in multiple ranges and planes. This is not jogging. I have not met a dancer who looks like a cancer patient unless they were anorexic or a professional. Okay? Those are the only cases, and that's a different reason. Or smoking and, the other vices that can go along with dancing. Sometimes dancing, anyway.
So the good dance buddies, anyway.
Anyway, the benefits of burst training are fat burning, growth hormone, decreased inflammation, increased insulin regulation, heals your adrenals. You only need to do this 2 to 4 times a week. Your total amount of time doing the burst activity plus recovery is 30 minutes, meaning if you do a sprint, if you do a sprint-like activity, I should say, where you get the intensity to a deep muscle burn in a minute or less, followed by full recovery, and your recovery takes you 30 minutes, that is your burst exercise for the day, finished. And then a day or two later, you do it again, and you may notice that your recovery time may drop by a couple minutes or more. Do you understand? There's no rush in this. If you want to do this safely, follow the guideline. 2 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes max, combined recovery and training time. Make sense? Okay. Now, point of wellness number 5, biotoxins. This is a huge topic. Absolutely insanely enormous, and it's only getting bigger. Why? Because more and more chemicals are being dumped into water, air, food, some of them being genetically put into the food, you name it. It's all being there. And it's getting bigger every day. And so I've classed 10pointwellness.com is the name of my website, so I am putting things, subcategories of 10 amongst most of these 10 points of wellness. So I have 10 major classes of today's toxins. Heavy metals, artificial sweeteners and other artificial additives, toxic makeup, and personal/household cleaners. People do not appreciate how toxic makeup is. They do not. I lost a biochemistry professor to an extremely painful blood cancer because he was a top chemist for a major makeup company, leaving his 4-year-old daughter behind. Okay, I am on a personal mission to make sure people's makeups are clean and safe because out of the memory of this beloved professor I had. Airborne and off-gassing particles, including rugs, sprays, fumes, the new car smell, which you can now buy in a can, evidently. Drugs of all types, whether they're prescription, over-the-counter, recreational, alcohol, cigarettes, you name it. Industrial petropollutants, freak foods, fried foods, fast foods, and fritz foods. Translation, genetically modified foods, deep fried foods, fast foods, and microwave foods. The 4-letter F word, FFF. Freak, fried, fast, and fritzed. Those are the 4 F's of food. Fritz, microwave. Microwave. Hazardous select EMFs. We'll have a speaker on very soon about that. I didn't know where to put this because you can put this darn near anywhere on the 10 points. This can be such a devastating. I've had patients who've come to me, whether they're on my 3-month online coaching program or in person, and the single biggest immediate thing that was completely ruining their life was having their skull blasted at night either by their cell phone, a smart meter, or a short in the wall. And once, now, that doesn't mean they didn't have a bunch of these other things going on, but once you resolved that, then all of a sudden they have a room to deal with everything else. But it was frying their brains, just frying them. So it's a big issue, real issue. Antibiotics and allergens, gluten, soy, pollen, and peanuts, and plastics leaching into foods in the body. So what's practical? Avoid them. That's the best I can give you in a 2-second soundbite. Next is bionutrients. You got to nourish your nutrients. Again, this is the article, Playing with Fire, Why Food and Nutrition Are Such Volatile Subjects. It's a very safe article to send to your family who disagrees with your current style of eating. Okay, and it's intentional because I've had my own dialogues with my family who are in different stages of understanding or misunderstanding about where I was coming from with food. Okay, and my level of self-righteousness at the time about my current diet fad, all right? And I'm owning that. I've been through so many different things, different levels of self-righteousness, and I've kind of come down off of that pedestal, in some cases thrown off, emerging bloody and bruised, but a bit more humble about the whole thing, which is why I wrote this article, because most of the anecdotes I write, I've had direct personal experience either doing or receiving or witnessing. 10 major classes of bionutrients: vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, enzymes, proteins, essential fatty acids, probiotics, fiber, glyconutrients, water, sunlight, and oxygen. You'll notice carbohydrates are not on that list because there's too many in today's society. They are not essential because they're everywhere. Breakfast: Only 3 patients ever who had a chronic disease had a faulty breakfast. But they had the chronically ill patients that I saw, 100% of them had a minimum of 7 out of 10 of these points of wellness way off point. 7 out of 10, 100% of them. This explained why they were bounced around from one clinician to the next. Okay, and they only got marginal, temporary, or no results or worse results. Because most clinicians, if they're honest, are only really good at 1 to 3 things. Or maybe 5. Almost nobody knows, understands, articulates, or even treats all 10. Okay? So this is why these people were, quote, medical failures in both the Western medicine and the alternative medicine world. Because they only had 1 to 3 things usually treated per personality, product, protocol, or program. Not all 10. Only 3 ever was one of their 10, was not one of their 7 out of 10 bad breakfast. That's why I made it a separate category. Now the 3 who did have good breakfasts, they had a 7 out of 10 of other things. Another 7 off. This is not breakfast. This is actually an advertisement from the 50s. You'll notice that the glass of orange juice is bigger than the baby's head and her stomach. Okay. Now, most people are worried about the zombie apocalypse, you know, coming with these adults coming for your brains. I'm more worried about the little blue-eyed Aryan children coming down off their sugar high, coming at me. All right. This is freaky. This much Florida orange juice. This is pure sugar. A lot of it fructose. Now, I can't teach you the details of breakfast, but if you opt into my website, and this is my, I have a skeleton website up, and you can do this now. You don't have to wait for the major one to launch, or you can sign up at my table. I can send you this, or you can download it for free. My visual e-guidebook I put together on breakfast. It's the first one of many to come. But this issue of breakfast was so glaring in my patients that I decided to write about it. And each slide is like this. It's one concept, picture. You know, there's more words and stuff on the other slides, but I made it purposefully super easy to read and, more important, implement. Okay, it's not some long literary vomit on breakfast. That didn't come out right. All right. Point of wellness number 8, bothers. This is a huge subject. Huge. Okay, so how do you deal with it? First, you have to acknowledge that life is more complicated than ever. And again, you could put EMF stress under this category as well. And there's many things you can do. Personally, if people need more direct help, is that they get their adrenal glands attended to. Because if your adrenal glands and your stress system is out of whack, you're more emotionally volatile. Number 2 is I strongly recommend the work of Byron Katie. How many of you have heard of her stuff, the work of Byron Katie? Okay. Her stuff is excellent. It's a very simple yet effective system to deal with the stressful belief systems which are ruining your life. And if you don't believe me, go download her universal belief list. And am I out of time? No. Sounds like a computer that's stressing out. Okay. Maybe we should fix its adrenal glands. Okay. So here's something to consider. Block time. Don't multitask. Multitask kills the brain. Kills it. So if you want to save your brain, focus on one thing for 30, 45 minutes. If you have to do a lot of little things, block them into one set of 45 minutes. Point of wellness number 9, bugs. This is symbiosis. Now, dealing with bugs is very tricky because the diagnostics in New Zealand are, depending on where you're located, can be difficult to access. So the best way to do it is to build up your immunity by attending to the other 9 points of wellness, and also to build up your internal gut flora through things like sauerkraut, kombucha, lacto-fermenting your own fruits and vegetables. There's many good books on the subject. There's even groups here in Auckland that do it. Point of wellness number 10 is bedtime. Save your sleep. Now this is a small comparison. Ancient humans had 9 to 10 hours. Today we have 6 to 7. They woke with sunrise. We woke with a very loud alarm, which just totally throws your adrenals into overdrive. It's like being shaken violently awake. They napped at the hottest time of the day. Many people today don't nap. Activities stopped at dark, even warfare. Whereas today we got the light bulbs, infrared, night vision goggles, and television, and everything extending our time awake. I myself, one of the things I had going on for 12 years is I was an insomniac. Had trouble getting to sleep, staying asleep, and woke up exhausted. So the sleep issue is huge for me. Anyone suffering with insomnia, we should definitely have a chat. I have an article I'm posting on how to nap without messing up your sleep. It's very important you guys read that. The other thing to do is to prioritize sleep like your pooch prioritizes its poop. Okay? When you're tired, go to bed. If you need to prioritize sleep very much. So, on my table today, I've got a sign-up sheet for my free newsletter, and you also get my free ebook on Magnificent Morning Metabolism, which is a book about breakfast and how it can help you heal your adrenal glands, lose weight, increase your energy and metabolism. I also have for sale a couple talks that I've done. These talks were done actually at Prana Festival, which Kusum is here. And if you don't know about Prana Festival, it happens on New Year's up in the Coromandel, one of the most beautiful pieces of land in all of New Zealand. I've been there for 4 years straight, 3 years, something like that? Yeah. Something like that. I love it there. I go back every year, and sometimes in between the New Year's as well. Highly recommend you go, and you get the discounted tickets here while Kusum is here. You can buy these CDs. I have a special. They're 1 for 20, 2 for 35, 3 for 50. The topics are the hour and 45-minute version of this talk. Another talk is a holistic version, a holistic approach to addiction. And then the third talk is a holistic approach to video game addiction. Now, how many of you struggle either with yourself or with a relative, usually probably a son, a nephew, a brother, an uncle, who struggles with video games? Don't be shy, raise your hands. Okay, I think this is the fastest emerging addiction in the Western world. I'm a former video game addict. Okay, so I have a lot of experience dealing with this, and I also treat addictions in my clinic. I have a very, very, very unique experience, unique perspective, I should say, on addictions, particularly video game addiction. Okay, I very strongly recommend you get these talks if you're concerned about it. It doesn't matter what there's a 5-step approach. I found, there's a 5-phase cycle of addiction that I've put together, and I've vetted this through hardcore Narcotics Anonymous people, Alcoholics Anonymous people, addiction counselors. They say it is an absolutely rock-solid model. There are 5 separate ways to intervene depending on what phase the person of addiction is in. And it doesn't have, this can be video games, food, alcohol, work, drugs, smoking, you name it, gambling. There are 5 separate ways of approach, of intervention depending on what phase they're in. Okay? Only 2 of those phases are unique to the addiction of choice. The other 3 are identical, no matter what the addiction is. Those are available for sale today. I also have an adrenal stress / sugar craving reducing tincture I put together. Clinician only quality access ingredients. You cannot get this in the stores. I made it myself. And it's on sale. I've got it for $35 here. Do not be under any illusions that all your problems will magically go away from getting a simple adrenal tincture. Okay? Do not be under any illusions. It is a support. It is one of the 10 points. Okay? This is the fallacy of most wellness clinicians. Here, take this one thing and you'll be well. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's support. Lastly, I have a sheet of paper with a list of 12 talks I have ready to go. If you enjoyed this talk and you found it informative and helpful, I have 12 others on different topics that I can speak at your organization or venue. You can have a list of that, or if I run out, I can email you the list. Now, if you need personal attention, my practice is in Hamilton. I treat many things, but the main focuses I do are injuries of all types to the spine, arm, and legs, neurological cases like dizziness, nerve pain, strange numbness, and the weird stuff that no one wants to deal with, chronic diseases, adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, hormone issues, you name it, and addiction cessation, smoking, food, video games. Or anyone you recommend who comes to see me. If you have a friend or family in driving distance that wants to come see me. If you need personal attention, but you're not in Hamilton, or are driving to available, or you have someone you know who's abroad, or in the South Island or whatever, I also do online Skype coaching, which is where I go through the 10 points of wellness in detail. At least 1.5 pages per point on average. And I go through, in person, over Skype, what happened, why it happened, and what we can do about it, prioritizing all the habits and one-offs per category that need to be changed in order of the least difficult, highest impact first. It is useless for me to give you a list of 300 wellness tips and say, here, go and do. It's useless. You don't know what's important. You don't know what to do first, next, and last. That is what the value of a coach is. The coach actually can look and see what's going on, what is the root issue that oversees and influences all the rest, and then picks the solutions that are going to be the easiest to implement with the highest impact. That is what the value of a coach is. This program is right for you if you feel overwhelmed by all the other health programs, if you want the simple, low-tech solutions, if you want to MacGyver your health, and you don't want to look weird while doing it. You're ready to make positive changes. You're a self-starter. You are devoted to something greater than yourself to keep you motivated, whether it's a child, grandchildren, a cause, something to keep you motivated. And you have at least a part-time job or financial resources. And you want someone to break it down into step-by-step protocols. This program is not for you if you have unresolved rebelliousness issues and view any health recommendation that changes your current routine as an affront to your independence. All of these things I'm listing are things that I've had to deal with former clients. Okay? Now those of you who are clinicians, you'll probably be laughing your head off through this list. Okay? This program is not for you if you prioritize your finances on personal comfort rather than personal progress. Those closest to you do not support you, or you're not willing to ask for said support. You're unwilling to question your stressful belief systems around your health and your life. You're unwilling to learn new ways to exercise, eat, sleep, or think. You are not an action taker, and you are not devoted to something bigger than yourself. So if you want to reclaim your body, mind, and bliss without becoming a health weirdo, you have to understand the new paradigm of health that incorporates all 10 major categories of wellness. And you must attend to all of them equally at the same time for a period of time, using low-tech, high-impact solutions that don't make you look weird or strange and isolate you from the rest of society. Knowing what I know now, I could have helped my grandfather. And I really hope you take this information and this paradigm of the 10 points of wellness seriously, so you could be present and in inspiration for your children and grandchildren, instead of just being a portrait of inspiration. Thank you.